Good morning or good afternoon. It depends when you open this up. So today's the nervous system. It is what it is, okay? Here you can see, there's some pictures right here. If you were to strip out the main nerves in the body, this is physically exactly what it would look like. Okay, so we have this big fat controller here, and that's your brain, called your central nervous system. So it's made up of two parts. We have our brain and we have a spinal cord, which is a thick bit that goes down. Those two things collectively together are your central nervous system. And then all the ones that all fan out of the brain and spinal cord are what we call the peripheral nervous system. So our outcome today is to find out how it works, what it teaches, who it controls, which is basically everything in your whole body. Whatever you do, it's because of your central nervous system. So let's get crankling, eh? All right, so no matter what it is, there always has to be an input, a sensory input, okay? So input means that you are receiving something, it's going into your body so your body can act on it. Input is the word, if you were to Google it, it means information almost, eh? So you have a receptor that picks up information and takes it straight to the brain and spinal cord. Your brain and spinal cord decides what it's going to do with that information, and then it will send signals out to work and to be effective. Okay, so let's say, for instance, there's lots of different things. So I've got a kid has kicked a soccer ball. I can see the soccer ball come into my face. What is the reason that I duck to get out the way? Is because the information has gone to my brain. My brain says, if you don't duck, it's going to hurt. So then the brain quickly sends off signals to all my muscles in my body to say, duck. Yay. All right. So that's one idea. There's also when you're eating food, you see food, you like food. Your body goes, oh, I can't wait to eat that. So already, just from seeing and smelling the food, your brain is sending signals out to your digestive system, to your salivary glands to start producing saliva, ready for that food to go into your mouth to be broken down. As it goes through the central nervous system, the brain and spinal cord know where certain vitamins and minerals and food needs to get absorbed and where it is to go and where it's needed. So even though our digestive system is its own, it still has to be told what to do. Pretty amazing, eh? Pretty amazing. Cool. Let's keep cracking on because it's quite a big topic. Now this is basically what I've been saying. So look at these words. There's going to be words that mean the same thing as well. So receptors receive information. Okay, so receptors in our nervous system always pick up information. They can pick up information externally, which is me seeing, okay, or touching or feeling, but it also detects information internally if there's something wrong, and also to keep your body at homeostasis. Whatever information it picks up, it has to go to the central nervous system. Remember, the central nervous system consists of the brain and spinal cord together. Those two organs in your body, your brain and your spinal cord, are called your central nervous system. They have little cells in there which make decisions for you. You've taught those cells, okay? As we grow up and we study and we understand what society is, your cells know how to act. As they know how to act, that's when they send out signals to go and do the job, and that's an effector. We make an effect. Okay, let's say, for instance, when our bladder starts to get full, as you know now, stretch receptors in the bladder send signals to my brain and spinal cord to say, hey, I'm full. I need to go to the toilet. Now, if you weren't educated as young, or if your cells were not working, what's stopping you from sitting there and just urinating on the floor and not going to the toilet? Nothing, is there? But because we've been educated, we know it's uncouth to sit there and urinate yourself. And throughout schooling and motherhood and fatherhood, we have been taught that when we need to go to the toilet, we need to go to a special room and sit on the toilet. And that is our effector. Moving on. Okay, so this is in your book. If you turn to page 30, this will have a lot of the answers to your online test. If you know this little graph perfectly, you'll be able to answer nearly all the nervous system questions. And I'll put a little quiz specifically to it as well. A lot of words, a lot of new words, what I want to teach you. All right. So you're getting in your head now, whatever you see, touch, or feel, all that information has to go to the central nervous system. The central nervous system makes a decision on what to do, and that sends the messages back out. Now, the messages going to the central nervous system, it's called your peripheral nervous system. Okay, so all the sensory nerves that are picking up information from outside, like seeing and smelling and touching, and inside, that's detecting normalities in your body, all of those nerves that are outside of the brain and spinal cord, they are called your peripheral nervous system. Okay, information can't just jump into your brain and spinal cord. It has to go up a certain path, has to go through a certain path. Okay, so let's follow this graph quickly together, and then you can start thinking of putting a scenario to it. So sense organs, your sense organs are seeing, smelling, hearing, touching, feeling, or same thing, touching, feeling, okay? Those sense organs pick up information all externally and internally, and they send information up the peripheral nervous system to get to the brain and spinal cord. Right, I'm going to add in a new word. The information you detect, that you pick up, that travels up the peripheral nervous system has a new word. Okay, when anything is traveling towards the brain and spinal cord, we don't call it towards the brain and spinal cord. We call it afferent. Afferent. Afferent means towards. So we've picked up information. Let's pretend I've put my finger on a pin. Okay, I've put my finger on a pin and I go, oh, that hurts. So information is going to go up afferently in my peripheral nervous system to get to my brain and spinal cord to make a decision. It's made a decision to tell me, don't do that, that's silly, okay? It's going to hurt. So it sends out information out of my brain and spinal cord, down my peripheral nervous system to tell me to stop sticking the pin in my finger. Okay, now the message that came out of my brain and spinal cord is called your efferent pathway. So exit, think of E for exit, get out, efferent pathway. All right, so pick up information and it has to travel up the peripheral nervous system on the afferent pathway to get to the brain and spinal cord to make a decision. The decision is made in an instant. So that decision, those messages have to come out of the brain and spinal cord, travels along the peripheral nervous system, and when it comes out, we call that efferent pathway. It had to exit the brain and spinal cord. Okay, right, now it gets a little bit more complex. When those messages come out, they don't just come out to tell your muscles to pull it away, okay? What they do that as well. That's here. So somatic is voluntary. Look at all these new words, okay? It's a little bit confusing. So I want you to spend a bit of time on this and pause it once we've done it and go through it yourself. Now, somatic means in the nervous system, voluntary. So that is me. My message have said to me, you need to stop sticking that needle, that pin in your finger, and I can voluntarily move my muscles away. And that's a sensible thing to do. Okay, it's a sensible thing to do. Now, that's a simple scenario. If we think of other things that might be happening inside the body that we don't control, okay? Inside the body, we have lots and lots of nerves that are working autonomically. I want to almost say automatically. Sounds similar, doesn't it? But it's autonomically, involuntary, okay? Now, I could be sitting here with this pin, I don't know why I use this scenario, in my finger, and I go, no, I want to inflict some pain on myself. No, but I could be pushing harder and harder. What will happen internally? My heart is going to start to beat faster. My pulse is going to elevate. Okay, my muscles and my glands and my hormones are going to produce certain fight and flight, which we'll go on to as well, to say, this isn't right. Why are you doing this to yourself, Tracy? It's not normal. Okay, it hurts. It's painful. So internally, there's a lot of messages going on as well. Okay, get away from that pin. So look here. So the central nervous system has gone, stop pushing the pin into your finger, Tracy. So it's traveled down the peripheral nervous system and it's gone on the efferent exit to send a message. My muscles have voluntarily stopped. Internally, your heart, let's say I've just stopped and nothing's happened, your heart has to keep going, doesn't it? Your smooth muscles don't change, they're just constantly contracting. My glands are constantly producing hormones, okay? So internally, depending on the situation, they're just going to keep going normally, or they're going to react on a situation, meaning if I wanted to keep pushing that pin in my finger, involuntary, my heart's going to go up. I'm going to have fight and flight hormones, which is your ephedrine, going to be being produced, okay? And this is where we go into parasympathetic and sympathetic pathway. Oh, so many blinking words, isn't it? So you can see the arrows, right? Internally, we don't control anything. Our central nervous system does it, and we can't help. It's going to do what it's going to do. Now, under the autonomic pathway, we have another system called the parasympathetic and sympathetic. Parasympathetic is always trying to slow us down, relax, calm, reduce all the hormones, reduce effects of anything, and keep us low. Sympathetic is the one that is going, oh gosh, we're fight and flight, don't want to do this, got to go here, got to go there. So you can think there's a hyperactive and a hypoactive system, but they have to work together and they don't stop working. If you go into parasympathetic too much, you'll always maybe have the sensation of sluggish and slowish, and things are not going to be produced in the body. If you're always in sympathetic, you could result in having high blood pressure and always under stress and always under anxiety, and your body's not going to get the right nutrition it wants. So these work perfectly together because there's a reason for that. And we'll get into that a little bit different later on so you understand it. All right. So you see, you detect, you feel, you touch. The signal goes afferently up the peripheral nervous system. That's all your external. Gets to your brain and spinal cord. Your brain and spinal cord make a decision. It's made a decision of whatever the scenario is or whatever it is it needs to do, and it sends the signal afferently. I said that wrong. Efferently down, out through the peripheral nervous system, efferently down to make the effect, okay? It may be for muscles to work and to be used, which you control, and also internally, all these signals and all these decisions are being told what to do, whether they need to go faster, whether they need to work slower, whether they need to produce more hormones or not. Depending on what the scenario is, these two fellas are going to come into play. All right. It might be that you have to run really fast because you're crossing a road and there's a fast car. This sympathetic activity will go. It will just go hard out. But then once you've crossed the road, parasympathetic is going to kick in to say, Hey, slow down. We've crossed now. Calm down. All right, so we need to hammer that graph. Let's move on. Sorry, otherwise I'm going to be taking too long. I hope you know now the central nervous system consists of your brain and spinal cord, and the peripheral, which is all the outside of the brain and spinal cord, consists of spinal and cranial nerves. Okay, and I've got that in your book on page 31 as well. Okay, let's turn over. Now, you may want to, I want you to fill this out by yourself, okay? You can go to the other PowerPoint and click on it slowly, but I'll just quickly go through it slightly. Now, in your brain and spinal cord, even though it's a big mass, inside there are working cell units, and those cell units are called neurons. Now, going back to the urinary system, inside the kidneys, you had little cells, and they were called nephrons, if you remember, nephrons. So inside the brain, they're the cells that make all the decisions, but they all work together, and they are called neurons. So neurons are the working cell unit that have all the information and work together. And you can see there's masses of them. There are masses and masses of neurons that sit all around the brain and all down the spinal cord. Each part has a different job to do. Okay, I'm going to quickly go through this because I hope you can fill your workbook out later, or you can pause and keep going. Pause and keep going. Now, the cell body, if you look in your book, it's that purpley round thing in the yellow mass, and that cell body has all the genes and the DNA that it needs to actually maintain life, okay? And it helps, that is what generates the impulse. It generates the impulse to send the message, okay? There is certain chemicals it needs sodium, potassium, but we will talk about how it does that later on. You just need to label the cell body. The function of the cell body is once it receives the information, it will generate the impulse. Right, new word, dendrites. So dendrites are all the little hands. Let me get the sun out of here. Dendrites are all these yellow spiny processes, all of these yellow spiny processes that come off from the cell body. Now, those dendrites are all long. They can be really small or they could be super long coming off that cell body. Those dendrites receive the information. Okay, so those dendrites are part of the afferent pathway because they receive the information. So if you just label those dendrites, they're the yellow things that come off the cell body, and those dendrites are what pick up information. Now the axon is the tail that comes off the cell body. Now, it's not the blue that's going around. The axon, it's just one long yellow tail, okay? Now, the axon, what that does, it conducts the impulse, the message, down to the bottom, right? So the dendrites has received the information. Cell body decides and produces on what and makes a decision and generates this impulse to send the message down. As the cell body has generated this impulse, because it knows what it needs to do, it sends the impulse down the axon, okay? It sends it down the axon because it needs to tell someone. At the end of the axon, can you see there were 1, 2, 3, 4, there's tiny little feet right at the end, tiny little feet. Oh, sorry guys, tiny little yellow feet there. Okay, they are called your axon terminals. Now, you will remember this when we talked about the muscular system and how a muscle contracts because the chemicals came out, the neurotransmitters, in the axon terminals. But it will make more sense as we go on. So the axon terminals are right at the end, and they release neurotransmitters to send the message on. So these neurotransmitters that are sitting in the axon terminal, they're the ones that pass the message on to, whether they're passing it into a muscle. Maybe they're passing it in to tell another neuron what to do, okay? But at the end of the axon terminal, there are little neurotransmitters that when they get the signal, they get released and they go and pass the message on, okay? They stimulate either the next neuron, maybe tell the next neuron, or it could be a muscle or an action of some sort. It will make more sense as we go along. I keep saying that, don't I? Now, the blue sheath around the axon is called your myelin sheath, okay? So your myelin sheath is like a wire. Oh, I'm trying to look for a wire here. Let me just take this out. So this is my axon. It's just my cord. Now, if I peeled off this rubber, okay, if I peeled off this rubber and then touched the wire, I'm going to get electrocuted because there's power going to it. So this rubber that is protecting the wire is called my myelin sheath. The myelin sheath that surrounds the axon is there to insulate the axon and protect it. What it also does is when that signal goes down the axon, the signal has only got one place to go, and that's to the axon terminals, because that myelin sheath is not letting that signal come out. All right. Now, if that myelin sheath gets damaged, when the signal goes down the axon, and if the myelin sheath is not there or it's deteriorated, the signals will just disband and they will not reach the axon terminal. Therefore, the message can't go to the next one and to the next one. That disease is called multiple sclerosis, and we'll go into that later on. Well done, guys. All right. So just going to quickly drag you back to here. Hope that makes sense. Dendrites receive the information on the afferent pathway. The cell body generates the impulse, which is your central nervous system, basically. Once the impulse is built up enough to be sent down the axon is sending the message down. The axon is surrounded by a fatty substance to protect it called the myelin sheath. It gets to the end of the axon and it's in these axon terminals where all these little chemicals are sitting to be released to tell the next neuron or whatever it might be, or muscle. Right, page 33, guys, neurogulars. Now, once a neuron dies, it's very rare or extremely slow that it can regenerate itself. Okay, so when someone does get paralyzed or what have you, it's very unlikely that they actually regain to walk again, isn't it? There is some possible cases. It's just at the moment a neuron regenerates at such a slow pace that by the time it's regenerated, it'll be past our lifespan. So in one way, it does regenerate, but it's so slow, okay? And it only regenerates on certain circumstances. So what I'm going to say to you is when a neuron dies, it dies, okay? But you have millions of them. You have millions of neurons, some more than others, not me. And also, they are surrounded by bodyguards to protect it. Okay, so there's lots and lots of bodyguards that will put their life on their line and they die way before the neuron will get killed. These bodyguards are called neuroglias. Now, these neuroglias are found in the central nervous system and some are found in the peripheral nervous system. There are 5 main types of neuroglars, and I'm going to quickly go through them so you can pause this as you go. All right, neurogula. They're cool as So these neurogulars protect the neurons getting damaged. This is our little mate. He is called oligodendrocyte. He is the second picture in your book on page 33. His name is oligodendrocyte. Now, this oligodendrocyte, that's his body, that's his cell, okay? All he wants to do is slippery slime up and find a axon of a neuron and surround it and protect it. So basically, oligodendrocytes is your myelin sheath around the axon. So your myelin sheath is a live cell and it has one job to do, and it's to surround the axon so signals can go through. Now, oligodendrocyte can only live and is only found in the central nervous system. You will not find an oligodendrocyte in the peripheral. You'll find someone else. Next one. Epidermal cells. Now, we've talked about the brain and spinal cord. We haven't got yet to the cerebral spinal fluid. All right, we've heard about the cerebral spinal fluid. Now, the fluid that surrounds the brain and goes down the spinal cord has to keep on circulating, okay? It's not just a fluid that stays there. This fluid is always being produced, always being produced. It's basically a brilliant filtrate system of the blood. It's always being produced, but it has to keep on moving. When it keeps on moving, it's these little guys here that help circulate. So they are lining our brain and they're lining our spinal cord, and they're like seaweed. They're constantly flushing and pushing the cerebral spinal fluid around the central nervous system. This cerebral spinal fluid helps nutrition, gives nutrition to the neuron as well. Only found in the central nervous system. And it's the 1, 2, 3, 4th picture in your book. Next one. Oh, microglia. Okay, this is a phagocyte. This phagocyte is like Pac-Man. It's the 3rd picture in the book. This phagocyte is basically the best cleaner you could ever have. I wish you'd come and clean my house, okay? It will just scully around all the neurons and keep the place clean. If there's anything, any bacteria, any virus or anything, it will put itself on the line. It will eat it and kill itself before it can get to the neuron. These microgliolas can regenerate quite fast, but of course, certain diseases and disorders, these will be overwhelmed, and therefore then they can't regenerate as fast as they'd like to, and the neuron can get affected. But basically what you need to know is that they are cleaners, they're Pac-Man. They will even eat each other if they think one is dirty. All right, they're mental. All right, so they are called microglia, and he is there. They're only found in the central nervous system. That's the brain and spinal cord, and they will constantly clean and pick up any harmful agents. If there's anything dead, any dead cells around, they'll eat each other. So they're a bit of a cannibal as well, aren't they? Pretty cool though. All right, astrocytes. Okay. Astrocytes help with this, something what we're going to learn, the blood-brain barrier. Right? Astrocytes is your top one in your book. An astrocyte is like the kitchen, the nutrition center, the diet person. This, whatever, the neuron has to have oxygen, water, and certain chemicals to live, just like we have to have food and oxygen. The neuron has to as well, but it's very sensitive. So and it gets all its oxygen and nutrients from the blood. So what this astrocyte does, who's absolutely amazing, this astrocyte has got big processes. So that's the cell body of the astrocyte. This astrocyte holds onto the blood vessel, the capillary. What happens is the astrocyte pulls out of the blood what the neuron needs to eat to keep alive. The astrocyte will filter it, clean it, make sure that what it gives the neuron is perfect. He's like your Michelin chef, okay? So he will put his life on the line. If there's some sort of blood poison going in there, this astrocyte will grab that blood poison going, oh, my neuron can't eat that, but he's probably killed himself in the process, and then he'll regenerate. Although, just like I said, there are certain diseases and disorders that will stop that being regenerated, and that's called astronoma, and it's like a brain tumor or a brain cancer. But anyway, only found in the central nervous system. It will basically feed the neuron, but it will make sure it's whatever is going to the neuron is perfect. Okay, perfect. Ensures the neurons always have a nutrient supply to survive. Last one. I might then give you a break. Schwann cells. Schwann cells are only found in the peripheral nervous system. So you know I said oligodendrocytes? They are a myelin sheath for the brain and all the neurons in the brain and spinal cord. This Schwann cell is the myelin sheath around the axons, all in the peripheral, in the peripheral nervous system. So they protect the axon in the peripheral nervous system. Feel free to go back through that All right, so they are neurogulars. Neurogulars protect the neuron. They can die and they can regenerate. But once a neuron dies, it's very hard to regenerate. Okay, I'm going to keep on going. Feel free to have a break anytime. Okay, we're turning to page 34. Now, I want you to flick back to your graph on page 30 and keep 34 as well. So you're going to flick backwards and forwards. Now, you can see on page 30 that when the brain and spinal cord has made a decision, it comes out of the peripheral nervous system along the efferent pathway, and you can see how it divided into the somatic, that's the skeletal muscles, and the autonomic, which is all involuntary. Now, when it's involuntary, yes, the heart has to pump, the digestive system does certain things. It all depends on what the scenario is for this parasympathetic and sympathetic activity to kick in, okay? So if you are in sympathetic activity, which might be running, which might be getting a fright, which might be a stressful situation of an exam, okay? If you are running in sympathetic activity, hormones are going to be released around your bloodstream, knocking on the door of certain organs to tell them what to do. Okay, so if I'm in fight and flight, which is sympathetic activity, I don't need to have saliva in my mouth, do I? Okay, I don't need my digestive system to be going because I'm not sitting down and relaxing and having a food. Okay, what I need my lungs to dilate so I can get more oxygen inside. So the hormones will go to my lungs and say to the muscles in my air pathways, my muscularis, and say, open up, guys. This person needs as much oxygen as it can. Now, let's pretend that it is running as fast as I can because I'm scared or I want to get home. I don't want to be late. Let's think of that scenario, okay? I don't need to stop. I'm not going to stop and go, oh, I need to go to the toilet. So what happens? Hormones go to the kidneys to say, hey, stop making as much urine for this short period of time, okay? We need to hold on to it till the sympathetic activity runs out. I do need to have more blood around my body, don't I? So all my muscles can be fed with the right nutrients. So my heart rate is going to increase. Okay, my heart rate's going to increase. And it's all on here on your books as well. And then, of course, my digestive system doesn't need to be working. I'm running for dear life to get home as fast as I can. So my stomach's not going to start on breaking food down and stuff. It just has a rest for a while because everything needs to go elsewhere. And that's in my sympathetic fight or flight mode. Hope this will make a bit of sense. That's why they say don't exercise on a full stomach, because when you're exercising, all your muscles need all the oxygen and nutrients. And if you're exercising on a full stomach, the digestive system is going, oi, I need to have oxygen and nutrients to break all this food down, but you're taking it. So how do you feel? Blech, sick, don't you? Right, you finished your exercise, you've got home when you're not late, you've got in, you've shut the door, and you can start to relax. This is when now your parasympathetic activity starts to kick in, right? The hormones that travel in the blood go and tell your lungs, okay, we can constrict now. The kidneys will carry on doing their normal jobs of filtering. The heart will slowly come back to this average, this normal heartbeat, excuse me. And our digestive system will kick in and come to normal again, all right? So that's how they work together. They don't stop at one doing a job all the time and the other one doing a job all the time. They are always like a seesaw. They're always balancing each other out. And that's how we get to do our activities. That's how we get to live normally. So fight and flight is your sympathetic activity. Rest and digest is your parasympathetic activity. Crazy, eh? Oh, right. I need to teach you. I'm going to do a whole nother clip about the nerve transmission. I will do that on a different slide. Note to self, I'm going to do that on a different slide, okay? Here, you can label the brain, all right? Feel free here to label the brain. And here, we're going to talk a tiny bit about how this little hypothalamus is what's basically the main fat controller in the brain that helps release all the hormones to help with the sympathetic and parasympathetic activity. So there's all different areas in the brain that all do different controls, and you can label the top part yourself. I'm not going to go into that. It's quite easy. Now, what I want to just help you out here, this purple big bit here, can I zoom in? This is your, oh gosh, I can't remember. It's your thalamus, isn't it? This is your thalamus. And here, this tiny little triangle here is your hypothalamus. It's a little triangle just coming off the thalamus. And here is your pituitary gland. Your pituitary gland. Okay, these help regulate your body in homeostasis. These are the things here which help with that parasympathetic activity and sympathetic activity. All the signals come to the brain, don't they? And the brain has to make a decision. I told you about externally, which might be using your muscles to duck or to move or whatever it might be. And then internally, this is where it sends signals, and signals come out as a hormone, flows around in your bloodstream to go and knock on the door of certain glands and organs and tell them what to do to try and keep your body in homeostasis. You can have a little read of that if you like. It's quite interesting. But I'm going to get you to... and I might come back to the old medulla oblongata, which helps controls your breathing. I will come back to that. Okay, page 36. Cerebral spinal fluid. When you go onto this PowerPoint without me talking, I want you to watch the YouTube clip. All right. It's a fantastic example of how cerebral spinal fluid is made. So can you remember the neurogula, which is helping the cerebral spinal fluid circulate? It's called your epidermal cells. Your cerebral spinal fluid constantly flushes around the brain and spinal cord, keeping it with all its nutrients that it needs. Okay. There are certain layers in your brain. Oh yeah, we're going to get to that. I may as well cover it now. Called menings. You can either call it meninges or menings. Everyone chooses to call it different names. These layers protect your brain and spinal cord. These layers also need to have nutrients to live. Okay. And the cerebral spinal fluid is what provides and keeps the area and those meninges with nutrients, and also keeps the area clean. Now, you've heard of meningitis, all right, and that is inflammation of the meninges, which is protecting the brain. And how they actually detect bacterial meningitis is by taking a lumbar puncture or a spinal tap, where they take a bit of the cerebral spinal fluid and they test it. Okay, so that's one way, just one way. So the cerebral spinal fluid has a few jobs to do: mechanical protection, chemical protection, and circulation. So mechanical protection means it's your brain is basically floating in this cerebral spinal fluid. Because it's floating, it's a little bit lighter. Not only that, if you do get a knock on the head, it's there for that little bit of protection between your brain and your actual skull. There's this little bit of fluid which helps, like a shock absorber, and that's how it does it mechanically. Chemically, of course, it provides all the nutrients and all the chemicals that the meninges and the brain and spinal cord need. So it's constantly providing chemicals for it to live. And also, because it's circulating, it will keep it clean, keep the area clean. Okay, so if there is any bacteria, small viruses or bacteria, it can actually take it away. All right, it can actually clean it out, get the other neurogulas to break it down, and constantly be working in that way. So there are three main functions of the cerebral spinal fluid. Okay, blood-brain barrier is fantastic. If I could upload a picture of all the capillaries in your brain, you'll be amazed of how much there is and how many there is. Oh, come back. I've done you, meninges. Okay. Your blood-brain barrier, I need to go back here. That's right. So because your neurons need to have a high amount of nutrients and oxygens, can you remember the name of the neurogula that filters that out before it feeds it? That is called your astrocytes. Yep. So the capillaries in your brain are the same as the capillaries all around your body, but there is certain chemicals that cannot get out of the capillaries in your brain. All right. Think of it as like I talk about a colander, a filter, or a sieve. Now, as the blood travels through the brain to feed all the cells in your central nervous system, there is certain chemicals that can filter out through the capillaries to feed, okay? So there are certain chemicals that can cross the blood-brain barrier, is your glucose, your sugars, your sodium, amino acids, water. Oh, it's got it all there, has it? Carbon dioxide to get out and oxygen to get in, okay? And some medication can get out. So certain antidepressants, certain pain medication can get out of the blood to go to the brain, to go to these areas that is needed. Also, alcohol and some anesthetics can get out of the blood-brain barrier to go to where it needs to go. And you know, when you drink alcohol, you get that funny feeling. And sometimes memory loss, because alcohol can get out of the blood-brain barrier in the brain. There are certain things that cannot get out of the blood-brain barrier. And that's a good thing, because you do not want to have any wastes or anything that's traveling around in your brain that can cause harm. But this is where they're always doing a lot of research to do with certain medication. So they're still trying to do, researching for cancer drugs and so forth like that, and brain tumors. But some of the medicines can't get out of the blood-brain barrier to go straight to the particular area, okay? So they're constantly looking at that. But like I say, the blood-brain barrier is there for a reason. It only allows certain substances to cross to get into the central nervous system, and some substances cannot cross because they're too big, too violent, or toxins. And that's how it protects itself. Fantastic little YouTube clip there. It's only 2 or 3 minutes long. Please go back and watch it. This is a long one, eh? All right, real quick, meninges or menings, however you're going to, they're just layers and layers that protect the brain. Okay, there's 3 major layers. Zoom in on here. Will it go any further? Yep. All right, so this is your spinal column. Okay, this is your central nervous system of your spinal cord. And this is your actual bit of your brain here. Oh, let me go down. Right, so you have a layer that is stuck like cling film to the brain, and that layer is called your pia mater. Okay, pia mater. It's very, very thin. It clings tightly to the brain, and it's the first layer of protection. Then the second layer is called your acronoid, and it looks like a web. Can you see it looks like a web? Okay, it's like a little bit of a web waxy substance, and it's called your acronoid, like a web, acronoid layer. Now, this is where all the cerebral spinal fluid is also traveling around this acronoid layer. Now then, out on the outer side is called your dura mater. All right, your dura is Latin for mother. All right, it's the outermost layer. It's double layered. It's thick it's very, very thick, and it is what will stop any bacteria getting in and so forth. So it does do a lot of protection there as well. And if you were to give cerebral spinal fluid, they have to get through this layer to be able to get the cerebral spinal fluid out to be tested. And it's quite tough. It's quite tough. So there's your 3 layers. All right. Great little clip there as well if you want to watch it. All right. Can you remember the areas of the spine when we did the skeletal system? We've got cervical, thoracic, lumbar, sacral, coccyx. And you know all the bones, the vertebrae sat on top of each other, didn't they? Now, in between each vertebrae, there is a nerve that comes out of each vertebrae. Now, they also are labeled. It's very similar to the actual bone, the bones. So let me just click on this picture for you here, if I can zoom in. There you go. So with our nerve, so you've got a picture, if this was a skeletal system, and there's a bone, a vertebrae protecting each one of these nerves. You've heard of impinged nerves, when the bones might move and they impinge on a nerve and it causes sciatica. Yeah, okay. So the first top of the nerves is called your cervical nerves, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there are 8 nerves that come out of each vertebrae. Now these nerves, and you can go into more depth, but I won't do it here, supply certain areas internally of the body, internally, okay? Then you've got the thoracic nerves, the lumbar nerves 1 to 5, the sacral nerves 1 to 5, and the cochlear nerve where it doesn't expand anywhere. Now, in your case study, I think Joan has damaged her L2, okay, this area here. So it's caused paralyzed, she's paralyzed of the lower limbs. Not only the lower limbs, internally, she'll lose sensation of the bladder, parts of the digestive system as well, and of course, reproductive organs, which we don't really talk about because it's the elderly. So it's really interesting. If you were in class, I would have given you all a nerve that's damaged, and you would say how it's affected the body. Now, if you damage anywhere between C1 and C3, I can tell you that they supply a lot of your internal organs, like your heartbeat, your breathing, okay, your contractions. So it's not good to break. Basically, if you've broken anywhere between C1, 2, or 3, you could classify that person as possibly being dead, all right? Like all they do in the ninja movies, and they're dead. If you break C3 and down, you are going to be a tetraplegic, and your internal organs will suffer as well. And some of you I know are already looking after tetraplegics. So each nerve doesn't only just supply externally, it tells the body what to do internally as well, okay? I wish we were in class so we could really go in depth with it, but it could be a little project. If I was to say to you, someone has damaged C6, it'll be cool to spend literally 10 minutes on Google and have a look at the complications if someone has broken C6. All right, I am going to do another presentation on the contraction, on the sending the impulse down the neuron. So I'll see you then. Oh, don't know how to stop. Did it not work? Oh, you're kidding me.